First it sounded crazy. A human foot had been mailed to Conservative Party headquarters.
Torso was found stuffed in a suitcase.
Fame. It's something millions of people chase. Likes, followers, validation. But what happens when attention becomes an addiction? In 2010, a man from Canada decided he would rather be notorious than invisible. He wasn't a movie star. He wasn't a singer. He was just another face online, posting selfies, chasing attention, and dreaming of fame. His name was Luka Magnotta, and when the world refused to notice him,
I don't have my looks. I don't have any life.
he found a way to make sure everyone did. Luka didn't care how dark, how cruel, or how unforgivable his actions had to be. Because for him, fame was worth more than life itself. This is the story of a man who killed for recognition. A story about vanity, obsession, and horror in the digital age. Welcome to Final Confession X. He wanted to be famous. That's what they called the video later. The moment when the mask slipped completely. When Luka Magnotta finally became the monster he'd spent years creating online. But to understand what drove him there, you have to go back, before the headlines, before the manhunt, before the world even knew his name. Because Luka didn't start out as a killer. He started out as someone desperate to be seen. He was born as Eric Clinton Newman in 1982, in Ontario, Canada. His childhood was quiet, isolated. His parents divorced when he was young, and his mother, often described as strict and obsessive, controlled almost every part of his life. By his teenage years, Eric was already retreating into fantasy. He changed his appearance, his clothes, his name, until Eric Newman was gone, replaced by Luka Magnotta, a persona, a brand, someone who looked like he belonged in magazines, not in the real world. He told people he was a model, a celebrity, even a victim of fame. He built online accounts that worshipped him, fan pages, fake interviews, hundreds of photos under fake usernames, all hyping up the same man, Luka. He was playing a part the internet didn't care about, until he made it care. It started small. Late nights in front of the computer, endless scrolling, searching for a reaction. Luka didn't just want attention anymore. He wanted control. When words stopped working, he turned to something that couldn't be ignored. Something that would shock the world into finally noticing him. A video appeared online. Grainy, quiet, and disturbingly calm. 2 kittens. A man in a hoodie. A plastic bag. No one knew who he was, but he wanted them to. In the video, named One Boy, 2 Kittens, Luka put 2 kittens inside a plastic bag. He then went on to connect a vacuum hose and turns it on. A 6-minute video that would haunt the internet for years. Within hours, the internet exploded. Animal rights groups, Facebook pages, online detectives, everyone was searching for the man behind the video. What they didn't realize was that Luka was watching them. He joined their forums, commented under fake accounts, and fed them clues that led nowhere. It wasn't guilt that kept him coming back. It was excitement. The hunt became a game. And he was the one controlling every move. The world was finally paying attention. His name wasn't known yet, but his presence was. And for Luka Magnotta, that was only the beginning. But Luka wasn't just a criminal. He was a master of attention, a man who understood the modern world better than most. The internet was his stage, and the world his audience. Every post he made, every taunt he released, had a purpose. He wanted notoriety, not just infamy. He wanted to be remembered. The online detectives weren't the only ones drawn in. Journalists from around the globe began to dig, to report, to speculate. Some were careful, some reckless, but all of them fed into the story he was building. A story of horror, fascination, and obsession. And the more the world watched, the bolder he became. By 2012, Luka Magnotta had become obsessed, not just with fame, but with the idea of creating something legendary. He had done everything to make people look at him, but now, he wanted them to remember him. In late May, a new video appeared online. It was titled like a movie, One Lunatic, One Ice Pick. The clip opened with the same quiet tone as before. Dim lighting, a small room, a man sitting on a bed. But this time, it wasn't kittens. It was a human being. The victim was Jun Lin, a 33-year-old international student from China. He and Luka had met through an online ad, and Jun had gone to Luka's apartment that night, completely unaware of what was coming. What happened next would become one of the most disturbing crimes ever caught on video. Luka filmed everything, calmly, methodically, as if he were directing a scene. When he was done, he posted it online and vanished. The video spread fast, just like the others, but this time, the horror was real. Police in Montreal quickly connected the footage to a grisly discovery: a suitcase left behind an apartment building. Inside was a body part, and a trail of evidence that led straight back to Luka Magnotta. The apartment was empty when they arrived. The walls were bare, the sheets gone, the bed stripped clean. But on the computer, they found hundreds of photos, edited videos, and messages. Clues that showed a man who had planned everything for months. Luka Magnotta hadn't just committed murder, he had produced it. There was something else they also found on his computer: a blueprint. Magnotta had orchestrated a worldwide scavenger hunt, a grim final performance. He mailed the victims' hands and feet to the headquarters of Canadian political parties and to schools in Vancouver. It was a deliberate, theatrical flourish, a final act in his macabre production. Police knew who they were looking for, but their suspect was already gone. Luka Magnotta had already staged his next act, an international escape. This wasn't a desperate flight. It was a performance, designed to prolong the fame he craved. He had spent years meticulously curating his online persona, and now his murder was the grim, sensational centerpiece. Magnotta fled to Paris within days of the murder, using his own passport. At a hotel, he used the name Kirk Trammell, a reference to the film Basic Instinct, which heavily influenced his crime. In his room, he left behind personal effects, almost as if leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for his pursuers. From Paris, he traveled by bus to Berlin. This move, too, was part of his narcissistic narrative. While in Berlin, he met with a man he connected with online, Frank Rubert. Rubert testified during the trial that Magnotta seemed slovenly and unappealing in person, a stark contrast to his online image. Magnotta's digital footprints eventually became his undoing. He was captured at an internet cafe in Berlin after an employee and another patron recognized him from news reports. Magnotta, in a final act of self-glorification, was reading articles about himself. When confronted, he offered a fake name before finally relenting. "You got me." The subsequent trial focused less on what Magnotta did, he admitted to the acts, and more on his state of mind. The defense argued he was not criminally responsible due to paranoid schizophrenia, which his family history supported. Psychiatric experts testified, but their conclusions were split. One defense psychiatrist described Magnotta as detached and psychotic, echoing his sister's testimony that his eyes had become vacant in the years leading up to the murder. The prosecution, however, painted a different picture. Their experts suggested Magnotta faked his symptoms, and that his sophisticated actions in the hours and days after the murder, meticulously cleaning his apartment, mailing packages, and planning his flight, were inconsistent with a disorganized psychotic state. The Crown argued Magnotta was motivated by a histrionic need for attention, noting that for him, negative attention is better than no attention at all. In December 2014, after 10 weeks of testimony and 8 days of deliberation, Magnotta was found guilty of first-degree murder and the other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. In 2022, news broke that Magnotta had been transferred from a maximum security prison to a medium security one. The move reignited public outrage, with many questioning whether the system was taking the severity of his crimes seriously. For the family of Jun Lin, the verdict and prison sentence offered little solace. Lin's father spoke of a life stolen, not just for his son, but for his entire family. The documentary, Don't F**k with Cats, Hunting an Internet Killer, leaves behind an unsettling reflection on internet culture, fame, and the chilling intersection of human cruelty in the digital age. Luka Magnotta is behind bars, but the questions his case raises remain free. It forced us to confront the darkest corners of the internet, where voyeurs and narcissists feed on each other. It showed a new breed of criminal, one who doesn't just commit murder, but produces it for an online audience, and it left us wondering if we, the consumers of this morbid spectacle, are entirely without guilt. Magnotta remains the self-obsessed enigma, reportedly marrying in prison, still finding a way to twist his notoriety into a form of perverse self-validation. He thought he was the director of his own macabre movie. But the real story is about his victim, and the global online community who refused to let his fantasy go unchallenged.
Kill them all, of course.
Some people have everything. born into a world of privilege, power, and endless opportunity. Robert Durst was one of them, an heir to one of New York's most influential real estate families. But for those who knew him, there was always a sense that something was terribly wrong beneath that polished surface. A man shaped by a dark childhood who could never escape his own demons. His story began with a disappearance without a trace, then a close friend murdered, and finally, a neighbor's dismembered body. For decades, Robert Durst managed to evade justice, shielded by his family's money and a strange ability to slip away. He lived a double life, hiding in plain sight with simple disguises. But underneath it all, it was always the same. A man haunted by his own past. He was a suspect in 3 different murder investigations, but managed to avoid prison, until a documentary filmmaker gave him the chance to tell his story. What followed was a cat-and-mouse game that captured the attention of the entire world. A man who thought he could control the narrative, but in the end, it was his own words that became his undoing. For in an unguarded moment, in a bathroom, a live microphone captured the truth that justice had sought for decades.
What the hell did I do? Kill them all, of course.
And his own betrayal became the final, shocking chapter in the nightmare he had created. In 1982, his wife Kathy McCormick vanished without a trace. She was intelligent and just months away from graduating as a doctor. Their marriage was stormy, marked by Robert's volatility and controlling nature. On the night of January 31st, she was seen by friends. Then, she was gone. Robert Durst didn't report her missing until 5 days later, and his accounts of what happened during those days were inconsistent. The police investigation, flawed from the start, lost momentum. Kathy's body was never found. Her family was convinced Durst was responsible, but his money and influence kept justice at a distance. The case went cold, but the suspicions against Durst remained. 18 years later, in 2000, hope was reignited for Kathy's family when police decided to reopen the case. They wanted to speak with Susan Berman, a writer and daughter of a mobster who was Durst's best friend and had acted as his unofficial spokesperson after Kathy's disappearance. But days before she was due to meet with the police, she was found murdered, shot in the back of the head in her Los Angeles home. She had known too much, and her killer knew she would talk. In 2001, shortly after Berman's death, police received a tip about an elderly woman in Galveston, Texas, who had been involved in an argument. They found a dismembered body in the water. The thing is, that woman was Robert Durst himself. In a bizarre, almost cinematic disguise, he was living his double life under the name Dorothy Sinner. He thought he was safe, hidden away in Texas. But when his neighbor, Morris Black's body was found in the water, his carefully constructed facade crumbled. He had killed his neighbor too. Later he was arrested, not in the luxury apartments of New York, but in a simple Galveston flat, still in his disguise. During his Texas murder trial, Durst claimed he acted in self-defense, stating that Black entered his apartment uninvited, leading to a struggle over a gun that accidentally discharged. The jury acquitted him of murder based on this defense, despite his admission to dismembering Black's body and dumping it in Galveston Bay. Through a new kind of investigation, one conducted not by the police, but by a film crew. A documentary called The Jinx, Andrew Jarecki, having directed a feature film based on the disappearance of Kathy, received a call from the real Robert Durst. Durst wanted to tell his story, a decision driven by his insatiable need for attention and control over his own narrative. Over years of interviews for the HBO series The Jinx, Durst proved to be an erratic, charming, and often contradictory narrator of his own life. The filmmakers unearthed critical new information. Kathy's family provided a handwritten note from around the time of her disappearance, which contained what appeared to be instructions for a burial site. More damningly, when the filmmakers found an old letter Robert Durst had sent to Susan Berman, a chilling similarity emerged. Not only did the handwriting look alike, but on both envelopes, the address for Beverly Hills was misspelled in the exact same way. Beverly, with an extra E. It was an almost perfect fingerprint of error, a small human mistake that tied Robert Durst directly to the scene where Susan Berman's body was found. Suddenly, it wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was evidence. It was a detail easy to miss, but in a criminal investigation, details mean everything. Confronted with this ironclad evidence in a final, tense interview, Durst had no explanation. He excused himself to the bathroom, seemingly unaware that his wireless microphone was still on. The cameras stopped rolling, but the audio kept rolling. It was here, in a private moment of vulnerability and self-reflection, that the true, chilling confession was captured. Durst muttered to himself,
There it is. You're caught. What the hell did I do? Kill them all, of course.
The day before the final episode of The Jinx aired in March 2015, Robert Durst was arrested in New Orleans. The bathroom audio became the most extraordinary piece of evidence in modern documentary history. At his 2021 trial for Susan Berman's murder, prosecutors used the Jinx footage and Durst's own words against him. Durst admitted on the stand that he had lied for decades, even confessing he wrote the cadaver note and was in Los Angeles when Berman was killed. This time, his wealth and high-powered lawyers couldn't save him. The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but died just a few months later, at the age of 78, while awaiting a potential indictment for Kathy's murder in New York. Robert Durst's life was a testament to the fact that while money can buy time and influence, the truth eventually finds a way out.
He yelled, "I'm going to kill you all."
He was uniformed as a policeman, he had ID, he acted just like a police usually does.
It doesn't look like Oslo anymore, it looks like some foreign country where you see this massive destruction.
July 22nd, 2011. What began as a quiet summer afternoon in Norway turned into one of the darkest days in modern history. A powerful explosion shook the center of Oslo. Glass, smoke, chaos everywhere, but that was only the beginning. Hours later, on a small island called Utoya, a man dressed as a police officer opened fire on hundreds of teenagers attending a political youth camp. By the end of the day, 77 people were dead. This is the story of how one of Europe's safest countries was brought to its knees, and how a single man tried to rewrite history through violence. The man behind it all wasn't part of a terror group. He acted alone, with a plan he'd been building for years. His name was Anders Behring Breivik, a man driven by hatred, delusion, and a desperate need to be remembered. He was born on February 13, 1979, in Oslo, Norway. His father was a diplomat, distant, cold, and often absent. His mother, struggling with her own mental health, became the center of his small, isolated world. As a child, Anders was described as intelligent but withdrawn. He spent most of his time alone, building model armies and escaping into fantasy worlds. Reports later suggested that even at a young age, he showed signs of deep emotional detachment, a lack of empathy that would only grow stronger over time. When his parents divorced, Anders was just 1 year old. His father cut contact completely by the time he turned 15. That rejection, combined with years of bullying and social isolation, left him bitter and angry at the world. By his late teens, Breivik had become obsessed with image and control. He worked out, dressed sharply, and tried to fit in. But inside, he felt invisible. Slowly, that feeling of insignificance turned into something darker: resentment, paranoia, and the belief that he was meant for something greater. In his early 20s, Breivik drifted away from friends and reality. He became obsessed with politics, nationalism, and the idea that Europe was being destroyed from within. Online forums became his new home, echo chambers that fueled his growing hatred and paranoia. He began studying extremist writings and conspiracy theories, convincing himself that violence was the only solution. He wasn't part of any group, but he saw himself as a soldier, someone destined to start a war that no one else had the courage to begin. For years, he planned in silence. He rented a farm outside Oslo, using it as a cover to buy large amounts of fertilizer, enough to build a massive bomb. He wrote a 1,500-page manifesto. He titled it 2083, A European Declaration of Independence. The manifesto mixed political ideology, personal diaries, and step-by-step instructions for terrorism. In it, Breivik portrayed himself as a modern-day crusader, a man chosen to defend Europe against what he saw as cultural invasion. He ranted against immigration, Islam, feminism, and what he called the weakness of Western democracy. He wrote about image, what he should wear during the attacks, how his face would look in the media, even how his trial could turn him into a symbol. He described the bombing and the massacre as marketing tools for his message. To him, the violence wasn't just an act of hate, it was a way to be seen. The manifesto was emailed to over 1,000 addresses just hours before the first explosion in Oslo. It was his final attempt to frame the horror he was about to unleash as something necessary, when in reality, it was nothing more than a delusional performance of ego and ideology. By the summer of 2011, Anders Breivik was ready. He was preparing for an attack that had been planned for 3 years. July 22, 2011. Breivik woke up early. He put on a police uniform he had ordered months before, perfectly ironed, complete with badge and gear. At 2:30 p.m., Anders Breivik left his farmhouse in a white van, loaded with a homemade fertilizer bomb weighing nearly a ton. He had spent months building it, testing chemical mixtures, and timing every move. Around 3:17 p.m., he parked the van right outside the Norwegian government headquarters, just meters from the Prime Minister's office. He locked the doors, walked away calmly, and minutes later, at 3:25 p.m., the bomb detonated. The explosion tore through downtown Oslo, sending shockwaves across the city. Glass and concrete rained from the sky, cars caught fire, smoke filled the streets. 8 people were killed instantly, and more than 200 were injured. As first responders rushed in, Breivik was already gone. He'd switched vehicles, changed his license plates, and was heading toward his second target, a youth camp on the island of Utoya, about 40 kilometers away. At 5:15 p.m., dressed in a full police uniform, he arrived at the ferry dock and claimed to be part of the security team investigating the explosion in Oslo. The guards believed him. They gave him a ride across the water. Minutes after arriving, he pulled out his weapon, a semi-automatic rifle and a Glock pistol, and began shooting. The first victims were the camp organizers and security staff. Then he moved toward the main area, where hundreds of teenagers had gathered, confused and terrified. He fired at anyone he saw, on the paths, in the tents, by the shore. Some tried to swim across the cold water. Others hid under rocks or in the woods. He followed the screams. Witnesses later described him as calm, focused, mechanical. He reloaded without hesitation, calling out to people in a friendly voice before opening fire. For over 70 minutes, the massacre continued. Calls flooded the police lines, but the confusion and the distance delayed their arrival. When the tactical unit finally reached the island, 69 people were dead, most of them under 20 years old. At 6:34 p.m., Breivik surrendered without a fight. He dropped his weapons, raised his hands, and said he had completed his mission. In total, 77 people were killed that day. The youngest victim was just 14 years old. After the last body had fallen silent and the echoes of gunfire faded, the island of Utoya was left a scene of unimaginable devastation. Back on the mainland, the news spread like wildfire. The nation of Norway, a country synonymous with peace and tranquility, was in shock. Families who had sent their children to a summer camp for political education and community building now faced an agonizing wait for news that, for many, would never be good. The days that followed were filled with national mourning. Roses became a symbol of remembrance, laid in vast carpets of red throughout Oslo and across the country. The world watched, offering condolences and sharing in the grief of a nation whose innocence had been shattered by a single man's hateful ideology. The focus shifted from the immediate tragedy to the man responsible. Anders Breivik was taken into custody, the architect of the country's worst atrocity since the Second World War. The legal process began, a search for justice and understanding in the face of an act that defied all logic. His trial, which began in April 2012, was a harrowing recount of the events of that day. Breivik, appearing unrepentant, even offered a chilling salute to the court, attempting to use the courtroom as a stage for his extremist anti-immigrant views. He pleaded not guilty, claiming he acted in self-defense to protect Norway from multiculturalism. Survivors and victims' families sat through the agonizing testimony, their strength a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The court heard how he meticulously planned the attack, down to the last detail. He was found to be criminally sane, a verdict that meant he could be held fully accountable for his actions. On August 24, 2012, Anders Breivik was sentenced to 21 years in prison with a preventative detention clause, the maximum sentence allowed under Norwegian law. This effectively means he can be held indefinitely if he is still considered a danger to society, ensuring he would likely never be a free man again. The physical wounds began to heal, but the psychological scars remained. Norway continued to grapple with the profound questions raised by the attack. How could such a thing happen in their peaceful society? And what could be done to prevent such hatred from ever again leading to such a loss of life? Utoya, the island of tragedy, slowly began to heal too, becoming a place of remembrance, a powerful symbol of the lives lost and the democratic values that the attacker had so desperately tried to destroy. Today, Anders Breivik is incarcerated at Ringerike prison. He is held in a high-security section in a 2-story complex that includes a kitchen, a dining room, a TV room with an Xbox, and a fitness room. He also has 3 pet parakeets for companionship. Breivik has been kept in isolation from other inmates since his arrest, with his only human contact being with a limited number of guards, a priest, and health professionals. He has repeatedly and unsuccessfully sued the Norwegian state, arguing that his isolation conditions violate his human rights under the European Convention. In recent court appearances for these cases, and for a parole application in late 2024, he continued to display neo-Nazi salutes and express extremist, unrepentant views, leading courts to conclude that he remains a significant danger.